This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Sean and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your hosts, Sean and Joni Wolfswinkel. We have a treat for you today. We actually have our very good friend, Lee Arnold, with us today. How are you, Lee?
I'm doing great, Joni and Sean. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you here. So just a quick bio on Lee. So Lee Arnold is a leader, international speaker, trainer, author, and investor who has spent years perfecting the real estate investing and private lending process. As CEO of several multi-million-dollar enterprises and the chairman of several private equity funds, Lee has facilitated billion-dollar real estate transactions across the country. His current success is a result of rebuilding after he lost everything in the real estate market crash of 2008. That experience prompted him to found He's the Solution, a nonprofit that helps others live out the truth that God is the CEO of all, and to host the annual Be Bold for Jesus conference. So Lee, again, thank you for joining us today. You have a ton of knowledge. I'm so excited to hear kind of your background. Where did this all get started?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story going back to 1995. I was working at a grocery store making $3.90 an hour.
Wow.
And I saw an infomercial. I worked three to midnight. I came home one night, an infomercial was on TV, and it said, if you want to, get rich, you should invest in real estate. So I went to one of their free seminars, at the end of which they convinced me to give them all of my money, max out all of my credit cards, and even to the point that I had to refinance my truck so that I could afford to go to this 3-day training. Long story short, it worked, right? And they taught me some basic fundamentals around real estate investing. And, with a little effort and gumption, here we are. So since that time, we flipped thousands of real estate properties. We manage several multi-million dollar equity funds. We've got a large portfolio of rental properties, and we're lending to investors nationwide. So it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love your videos and your content with the Kogo Nation. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love it's almost like the circle of life, but the circle of wealth, that I think you built. And can you explain some of that? Because I love it's all your different enterprises, right? And how there's synergy between them all. And can you get into that and how it was developed? And it probably wasn't all at one time. I'm sure it started one at a time or.
Yeah, it's kind of grown over the years, but I started investing in real estate in 95, and in 2001, I was living down in Salt Lake City, Utah. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, but I had moved to Florida. And then when I was traveling in Utah, I met my wife. So I moved there to be closer to her, obviously. And we started investing in real estate and doing things there. And I was approached by a marketing company about writing a book and tape course myself. So I kind of came into the industry through books and tapes, and now I'm going to write a book and tape course. And this one was on short selling, because in Salt Lake City at that time, 2001, the Olympics were coming for the 2002 Winter Olympics, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And all these speculators had flown into town, and they were buying these big mammoth jumbo homes to house, Fox Sports and ESPN and all of these different channels related to the Olympics. Well, when they left, with it, they sucked out about 20% of the market, and values plummeted and foreclosures were rampant. So we were doing a lot of short sales. We were the largest foreclosure and short sale provider in the state of Utah at that time, about 400 to 500 short sales a month.
Wow.
And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the short sale process.
Yeah.
So through that, I kind of became an expert in short sales, and we wrote a book and tape course about it and started sharing with our clients. And that led to the education division of our company, which is the Lee Arnold System of Real Estate Investing. Well, fast forward to 2007, 8, 9, where we pretty much lose everything, and property values plummet to like 30 cents on the dollar of what they were just a year before that. And there's all these amazing deals, right? So we've got properties at 30 cents on the dollar. I've got a customer base now, clients nationwide, that were following me and investing in short sale foreclosure. Well, now we're in the perfect primed market for short sale and foreclosure, but now it's nationwide, not just allocated to Salt Lake City. So I had two different groups of people coming to me in 2009 and 10. The first one was, Lee, I'm finding all these incredible deals, but I can't find any capital because, as you guys remember, anybody who was in a lending business was now bankrupt as a result of 8, myself included. I had a lot of hard money loans that I had placed. So they're coming to me and saying, hey, Lee, we've got all these great deals, but we can't find any lenders. And then I had all these people coming from my list that said, hey, Lee, we've got all this capital, but we don't know where to put it. We're afraid to deploy it. What should we do? And I'm like, well, let's just bring the two of you together. And that's actually where the name Kogo Capital comes from. It's a Greek word that means to bring together. So Kogo Nation is merely bringing together people who have a great deal with people who need the funding for that deal. That's where it all came from. So we started doing what's called tabletop lending, where we would underwrite the deal, we'd find the lender, we'd bring the two together, we'd fund it, and then we would service the loan. But that's what led to starting our private equity fund. So we went from the Lee Arnold system of real estate investing to providing funding for our clients through Kogo Capital, to needing to deploy bigger and larger numbers of capital in shorter periods of time, which is why we started our private equity funds. And then we were discovering that servicers weren't doing as good of a job as we could. So we started Lake City Servicing to manage all of our clients' portfolios of loans and deployment of capital through the equity funds. And then it was in 2009, when I had lost everything, that I felt like it was God's way of getting my attention and saying, you know what, Lee, you are not everything. You are not, great as you think you are. And he took everything away from me. And he said, if you want to run a successful business, you need to build it on a foundation of me. And that's when my wife and I started He's the Solution Ministries, which is the last piece of our circle of wealth. The Bible says that what is it to a man if he inherit the whole earth but lose his own soul? So it didn't make sense, at least to me, to be teaching people how to create wealth and passive income and family longevity without sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. So I felt like I needed to help them gain wealth, but also gain a relationship with Jesus Christ. So that's the full circle of the circle of wealth.
Wow. I'm just amazed, like how you make it sound so easy, but how you just built all that so quick.
What's funny is the very first time that we met you at the Collective Genius Mastermind, I was like, man, I want to be like Lee when I grew up.
But how did you? What was your background? I guess you got right into real estate, right? So as a very young, putting together these funds and building the staff and managing, I'm curious, just how did you learn that so rapidly? Did you get great people behind you that you just found great people that could do that type of thing? Or, scaling that quickly and building the teams and learning all the, because there's some complication behind some of the things you do.
Yeah. How much time do we have, Sean?
That's a loaded question right there.
I feel like some of the biggest companies are built on a foundation of failures because it's through our failures that we learn the most.
Right.
And fortunately, when I got into this in 1995, I was 18 years old. I just graduated from high school, class of 95. I'm 45 years old, for anybody wondering. Some say my kids say I'm really old, and others say I'm just a youngster. So I don't know who to believe. But I grew up on a farm. So I grew up, throwing hay all summer long and taking cattle to the auction with my grandfather. So we didn't, I didn't know anything about business or employees or building or growing things. It was just kind of the necessity of the situation, Okay, I bought a house. Great. Now I've sold the house. Great. I just made 15 grand. Great. Now what do I do? Well, do it again. But as we grew in scale, I became to realize that great books were tremendous mentors. And I also started paying for mentorship. Years and years and years ago, I read something where your income is there's a calculation, and don't quote me on these numbers, but something about the amount of money that you spend annually on education, if implemented, should produce 1,000% rate of return.
Yeah.
So if I spend, $10,000 on mentorship or hiring a coach or consultant, I should anticipate $1 million in revenue that year just through implementation. And so I became a student, hungry for anything and everything that I could find. And, from 1995 to 2004, I was doing the kind of investing that the rest of us have done, right? We call a real estate agent. We look at bandit signs, or we put bandit signs out. We put ads in Craigslist or in the local newspaper. We do all these things. And then my wife had our twins. It was December of 2006. And a friend of mine had given me a CD that actually went into the side of the computer, to give you some idea how long. So I dropped this DVD into the side of my computer. I'm sitting in the hospital with my wife and our twins that are 3 days old. And it was a Ron LeGrand seminar.
Oh.
If you guys know.
Yeah.
And he had a guest speaker on his stage by the name of Dan Kennedy. And I was riveted, because Dan Kennedy said, for any business to really be successful, you need to have a strong marketing arm to what you do. And he said it this way. He said, for a business to be successful, it needs two things. It needs leads and it needs sales. And that's kind of become my mantra, even 18 years later, my mantra is leads and sales, leads and sales, leads and sales. And so we track some of our tightest KPIs that we oversee is just the tracking of how many leads are we producing in the various verticals and the various buckets. What is our cost of the lead? What's the return on that lead? And for anybody running a business, and I now do a lot of business consulting, so I'll come in and the first question I ask any company is, show me how you produce the leads. What channels are you using? What is the cost? And then how are you producing revenue in those leads? How are you monetizing the leads? So that piece was critical. And now as I look at a new business or even acquiring businesses, that's the first thing I go to is how are they producing leads? How are they managing the database of customers that they have? And how are they serving them in a way that customer wants to come back and do business with them again and again and again and again? So it's been a uphill battle and journey, to say the least, but really it's just through figuring things out, Sean and Joni, as you guys have done, is figuring things out, surrounding yourself with the right people. You mentioned Collective Genius Mastermind Group. I mean, that has been so valuable to me and this organization. We saw almost a 400% increase in our volume since I've joined CG in just the first year. So things like that, cult coaching, mastermind, mentorship, also critically important to the success path, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I hope everybody was taking notes, because I was taking mental notes there. I mean, it's so true. And to be honest, and this looks bad on us, but we probably didn't even figure that out until maybe the last, we always spend money on marketing, but it was like just throwing money at the walls and just, you hope to produce something, but like the minute we got it really dialed in and like
started to track it,
it's just, it's a game changer in your business.
Yeah.
So, and now I know why you were asking the questions too on the podcast and all, because we're probably not tracking the leads and monetizing what we should be, but I appreciate all that.
Well, one question that I have for you, which I mean, all entrepreneurs I think kind of feel it, or it's as challenging for us, is that how do you not chase a shiny object and stay focused on just your core business, right?
Yeah, because you have so much going on. So how do you know it's not going to distract you from what you do really, really well?
I don't think that I'm qualified to answer that question.
Well, you seem to do it so seamlessly.
Your team's probably stressed out, like, not another business. No.
Yeah, I am the notorious squirrel, right? Because as an entrepreneur, I'm always fascinated by new businesses, new things that are happening, new technologies, new softwares, and I either want to start them, buy them, develop them, and it's now my team. I've got a really strong executive team that I've put around me to keep me focused, because that's what entrepreneurs are. I mean, we are the quintessential, shiny, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. And if we're not surrounded, or if we don't intentionally surround ourselves with an integrator, we are going to continually be spinning our wheels. And I remember years and years ago, I was in a mastermind group, and one of our mastermind members goes up and he's in the hot seat and he shows us all of these new ideas that he's going to implement in the coming year in all these new companies. Now, fortunately, by this time, I had been disciplined by people much smarter than me. And I looked at his whiteboard and I said, okay, let's break this down. I said, how much is this business going to produce? How much is this business going to produce? How much is this business going to produce? And so we did the math. And what we determined is that the new efforts were going to produce $500,000 less than the effort he was currently focused on. I said, well, what if we took the same effort and just poured it into what you already have and just made it better? right? Improve the customer journey, customer experience, the client results. Imagine if we just took all that energy and put it on this thing. What does that look like? And you know, that little piece of information cost me millions of dollars because I used to be him, right?
Yeah.
I used to have 100 different companies and none of them were doing really anything of significance because there was so many.
Yeah.
And now I've learned over the years that if you can just keep everything focused on your core competencies, and ours are real estate and lending. If it's tied to real estate acquisition, management, lending, portfolio servicing, private equity fund management, syndications, all tied to real estate, we're really good.
Right.
But anytime I divert from that vertical, it doesn't end well. So my discipline has come from a desire to stop losing money on stupid ideas, even if they're good ideas. They don't fall into our core competencies and they must be kicked out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
A question I've always wanted to ask you is, as you were growing, and I know you kind of built it twice, but when did you, like, was it revenue? Was it a certain amount of people when you started to put in that C-suite and started to, you know, pay some much larger salaries than probably you were used to in the past? Or I know it's been like that for us, but I mean, how did that transition happen, and was it a certain size? Was, like I said, revenue? Was it size of people or staff? Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're meant now throughout your companies over 100 and some staff members, correct? If that's
yeah, we're 130 on payroll and we got another 30 VAs and about 20 contractors throughout the country.
Yeah,
wow,
that's huge. Yeah. So, I mean, it started with the one, right? And it started with just you and your wife, and then you grew from there. So what's the fast version? I know I'm asking pretty hour-long conversations, but.
Yeah, there's a term I learned in business a few years ago, and it's called the point of diminishing return. And the point of diminishing return is where any additional effort from you is not going to produce any additional results, because you've capped out, right? So we as humans are limited to the number of available working hours and days. And so we can only accomplish so much. But if we leverage other people's time, then we can accomplish more. And that's where an employee comes in. So I remember it was 1999. I had never had an assistant before. I'm now 21, 22 years old, right? And I'm interviewing people that are 30 years my senior and offering them $12 an hour to come do everything I tell them to do. It was very awkward. And for anybody who's never hired an assistant or an employee before, it's a very strange transition to go from I have to get everything done myself to now I need to manage somebody else to get it done as good or better than I can do it.
Yeah.
And from my first assistant being hired, I realized that the more compensation I offered with the greater level of upside, the smarter the caliber of person I would attract. You know, the old adage in business and in life, you don't get who and what you want, you get who and what you attract. Well, as entrepreneurs, we are often hesitant, for good reason, to pay these outrageous salaries because in many cases, we don't have the income to cover them. But I learned that if you find the right people, they're not so much motivated by just a big salary. They're motivated by providing a valuable service that's going to benefit and bless others. And if they can participate in the upside, they don't need a big salary to come on. But you've got to give them a pathway to where they can win as the organization wins and create compensation models that will move them from where they are to where they want to go. As employers, we have to make the goals of our employees a bigger priority than our own. You know, the old statement of if you'll take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers, and your customers will take care of the business.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to bring in really high caliber, talented people. And so I started offering wages that were significantly higher than what I was making. So now I'm paying people literally to run my companies, and I'm paying them more than I'm earning. Because I was willing to do that if it meant moving the enterprise forward, because, and really guys, to get deep on you if I can.
Yes, please do.
It wasn't until I started the ministry that I really began to understand working for a purpose. up until that point, I was working for profit. I was working for dollars. I was working for increase. You know, he who dies with the most toys wins. But when I started the ministry, and we started taking a pretty substantial portion of our profits and funding the ministry with those dollars, that I started thinking on a much bigger, grander scale. Because now, if I can take $1 million business and make it a $10 million business, well, 10% of $1 million versus 10% of 10 million is significant. But if I could take a $10 million business and make it a $50 million business and a $100 million business, that's better, right? So what I did is I started sharing this with anybody and everybody that I would interview, that this is the mission of the company. Yes, profit, because without a margin, there's no mission, right? So the enterprise has to be profitable if it's going to finance the mission. And this is such a misnomer in many religious communities to think that a nonprofit needs to be just that, non-profitable. Well, we can't merge the two, okay? If you want to run a nonprofit, file a 503c and start a nonprofit, but understand that even a nonprofit has expenses. So it needs income. But for Christian leaders in business, oftentimes there's this feeling that I can't make too much profit because God wouldn't look kindly on that. No, we see in the story of the talents where the owner of the farm gives 3 servants income, money, and says, hey, manage this while I'm gone. Well, to the one who managed it to 100% rate of return, the property owner says, to you, I'm going to give more. To the one who squandered the talent, he says, you wicked, evil servant. Why didn't you put it in the bank? At least then you could have drawn interest. So as a business leader, we need to be looking at, especially for those that are ministry minded, business as a ministry. We call it BAM, business as a ministry, where the for-profit enterprise feeds the nonprofit effort. And so through this, we have shipped thousands of Bibles all over the world. We have seen countless numbers of people come to Christ and rededicate Christ and give their businesses to Christ. I mean, it's been life-changing. And because of the mission, because of what we are driving for and working towards, we have attracted some of the top talent I've ever found at prices that were affordable, because it was no longer just about how much am I getting. It's now more about what is my effort producing from the standpoint of kingdom yield, right? Kingdom returns. So that's what drives me. That's what motivates me. And because of that, God is blessing the business abundantly. We're growing and scaling at paces we've never seen, and we're attracting some of the best talent we've ever found.
Yeah. Wow.
It's amazing.
Do you feel, I guess, I mean, it's got to be heavily in your interview process and talking about that and talking about the mission. And so, because it's what you attract. So there's a lot of awareness on that on the front end. And so do you feel like it's 100%, everybody that's on your team member has to be about that, or do you feel like, and are they, I guess, is that the culture you're I don't know how to explain it well, but you know what I mean?
Let me jump in here real quick before we venture into the area of illegal, because I cannot legally require that somebody be a like mind or similar faith as I am. But we are very open in the interview process that we are a Christ-based organization. We pray at our staff meetings. We pray at our potlucks. We sponsor an annual Be Bold for Jesus conference that attracts thousands of people every year. And you don't have to buy into that. You don't have to believe the way we believe, but know that if you accept this offer, this is happening. So you can't come in and then suddenly go back and say, oh, they're offending me. Because you knew coming in. So at the bottom of all of our offer letters, there's a little disclaimer that says, we are a Christian-based organization, and if this will cause you to be offended through your tenure working here, we would encourage you not to accept this offer. So I can't require or demand a faith-based employee buy into this. And I would say probably 50% of our staff is not faith-based. But they like the mission, even though they may not necessarily believe it or buy into the mission. They like the fact that as a company, we are focused on serving and blessing others.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was going with it. Yeah.
Well, Yeah. Now that we're getting into the ministry part, I'm interested to learn more about the Be Bold conference. Share with us.
Yeah, the Be Bold for Jesus conference came about back in 2018 because I'm in the real estate investment space. So we, prior to COVID, we were a nationwide traveling seminar company, and we were putting on seminars in 2 to 3 cities a week all over the US. But when COVID hit, we had to move to a non-traveling seminar company. Now we deliver all of our seminars via Zoom, and any of our certification masterclasses are actually held at our offices here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. But we were traveling the country, and Joni, where this came from is when God got a hold of me in October of 9 and we started the ministry, I started holding church services at all of our seminars. So from 2000 to 2009, I've got people in a room, hundreds of people in a room, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, teaching them how to get rich. Many of them believers. So now I'm actually taking them from church to teach them how to get rich. So when God got a hold of me in 9, I started holding church services at all of our events nationwide. And people had such a great time that they started asking if we could do something on an annual basis where they could all come together and fellowship and worship together. And so in 2018, God said, Lee, I want you to start this conference. And I said, okay. So we thought, well, we're a nationwide organization. Where would be central for everybody? So our first Be Bold for Jesus conference was held in Dallas, Texas, October of 18. And we had 18 people show up. Woo! It was a blowout success. We took a break in 19 because clearly our marketing was flawed. So we needed to retool that. And we came back in again in 2020 and we held it here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We had about 300 people in attendance in 2020. In 2021, we had 900 in attendance. And we just finished the conference a few weeks ago here in Coeur d'Alene, and we had 1,250 in attendance, but we had to stop selling tickets 6 months beforehand because we sold out.
Wow.
So the coming year, we're moving the venue to an area that we now can hold 7,000 people. And God has already sold almost 2,000 tickets, and we're still about a year away for that venue. So, Joni, to answer your question, the purpose of the Be Bold for Jesus conference is twofold. Number one, it's to get saints together, iron sharpening iron, where we just, the body strengthens each other, and we grow in our faith, and we grow in our willingness and our desire to be bold for Jesus. The second reason we do this is to bring in speakers from different places, different businesses, different backgrounds, who can speak about what you can or can't legally do, right? The media has suppressed the Christian voice to the point where political correctness says, keep your mouth shut. Well, the Bible says otherwise, but we're so afraid to say something that will be offensive or to do something that will be illegal or trend into human resources law, right? You can't say that. But there's a lot of stuff that we can say and we can do, and we can do it in a way that is respectful and honorable. And not to be obnoxious. These guys with the sandwich boards and the blowhorn standing out on the street corner, that's not what I believe being bold for Jesus is about. Turning people away and offending them, that's not boldness.
Yeah.
Loving them and sharing the gospel of Jesus, the good news with them, to me, that's boldness. So that's what the conference is about. This coming year, we have Jeff Foxworthy coming out as our keynote. We have Ken Ham, who built the Ark Encounter over in Kentucky. If you guys are the life-size Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
That was built by a guy named Ken Ham. So he's coming out to speak. And just a tremendous lineup. Last year we had Tim Tebow, we had Willie and Corey Robertson from Duck Dynasty booked. Just some, great Christian people that love the Lord and love to come out and share about that. So it's been a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing it.
Love it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
And sharing your testimony.
So we'll kind of, so I know that you talked a bit on your bio and what you kind of went through in 2008, losing it all. Take us there. Like, what happened? What did you go through in 2008?
2008 for me was a wake-up call to all of the things that I had been fundamentally doing wrong. And what I was doing is I was running companies not for profit. I was running them for leverage. So as you guys know, in the real estate space, you can borrow a lot of money against real property. And in those days, in 2004, 5, 6, monetary policy was almost non-existent. And if you could fog a mirror, you could borrow $1 million. I remember being at a seminar that we were doing in Las Vegas back in 2005. And I had a woman come to me who was a housekeeper. She cleaned houses for a living, honorable profession, but she was only making like $10 an hour. And she was getting ready to close on an $800,000 mortgage on a house in Vegas.
Wow.
And I looked at her, I said, how are you going to afford that? And she went, oh, well, it's going to go up in value and I'll just sell it before my payments kick in.
Oh.
And I went, okay, now I'm seeing all of these signs, right? I'm experiencing all of these glimpses into what's about to happen, but I was guilty of it too. I mean, I was going to auction and buying a house for 150 grand and getting a private money lender to lend me $300,000 against it. So I was crazy leveraged. But the reason I was levering is that I was taking all of my leverage capital, and now I'm building 14,000 square foot ski in, ski out homes on the backside of Park City in Deer Valley. So I'm building these luxury homes for $8 million, and I'm selling them for 22 million. Well, when 8 hits, and I'll never forget it because I just ran a full page ad in Ski Magazine. It was the July of 8 issue. And in August, Bear Stearns goes down, then Lehman goes down, and the whole financial thing just implodes. So in August of 8, our company was averaging about $250,000 in revenue a month. In September, 25,000 came in. From 250,000 to 25 grand.
Wow.
Because all of the loans we were expected to close didn't, because banks suddenly said, yep, we're not honoring those anymore.
Wow.
I contacted my lender, the Bank of Denver, on my construction projects. I owed my vendors $1.2 million, so I'd submitted a draw request to pay all of my laborers and suppliers. And the FDIC answered the phone and said, oh, we're sorry, the Bank of Denver no longer exists. They've gone bankrupt. We are now overseeing their assets, and we're not honoring construction loans from this point forward. So now I've got these 3 massive homes under, 30, 40, 50% stages of construction, and the bank said no.
Whoa.
So now if I go to the auction and buy a property, I go to a lender and they say, yeah, Lee, sorry, we're not lending. And the entire economic system just literally closed. So living in an environment of leverage can be shut off in an instant. Lines of credit that we had from various banks were pulled. I had a American Express Platinum card, which I ran the company on because I could charge an unlimited amount of money on it and pay it off, right? American Express, I went from an unlimited line down to a line of $5,000. Wow. Because even the credit card companies were saying, okay, it's getting too risky out there. We got to pull back big time. And everything just sucked back. So now I've got 85 rental properties that I'm managing. I've got tenants in there who now have been laid off by their employer. They're not paying their rent. I've got hard money loans that I have issued on the leverage that I have gotten. They're not now paying their bills because they can't sell the asset to pay me back. It was just like this massive implosion. I could have never predicted that it was going to happen. But looking back, I don't understand how I didn't see it coming. It was so obvious. But I didn't want to see it coming, because I had the Midas touch. Everything I touched turned to gold. Well, in a unregulated financial environment, that's true of anyone that knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I didn't read the tea leaves. I didn't want to acknowledge them, and I just kept plowing forward, foot on the gas, 100 miles an hour, and I literally hit a brick wall. It was unbelievable.
How did you?
But
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah. How did you? Because I think there's people that are gonna either hit some of those times or maybe trying to pick themselves up from where they are now, or maybe had a failed business. How did you mentally get back up and rebuild? How did you overcome that? Going from the Midas touch to I failed. How did you rebuild?
Well, the main answer to the question is necessity. February of 8, my wife had our 3rd child. So this was our 3rd child in 14 months. She had twins December of 6th and another one February of 8. So I got 3 kids under the age of 1.5 in diapers, no income. And I didn't have any choice but to just, figure it out. So the first thing I had to do was I had to unravel the mess I'd created with all of this leverage. And so I spent the next 18 months sitting down with every person that I owed money to and having a face-to-face conversation with them about where I was at, the state of the markets, and the fact that I didn't have any money to pay them. So we could either settle on, a small, tiny amount, or they could sue me, get a judgment, and force me into bankruptcy. But whatever they chose to do, they weren't going to get anything. You can't get blood out of a turnip. And that was my message. And so over the period of 18 months, I literally negotiated out of every single one of those deals. I short sold the assets that were upside down. I lost many of those properties to foreclosure sale, but I did not have to file bankruptcy. And if I could leave your listeners with any message at all, it is this: do not ever file bankruptcy unless you owe like $100 million, right? Donald Trump taught us that. If you're going to file bankruptcy, make sure you owe hundreds of millions of dollars to make it worth time. Because all a bankruptcy is it's a forced renegotiation of your debt with creditors. That's it. Mm-hmm. And any single person can do it. They don't got to pay attorneys. They don't need to do a Chapter 13. They can work through it if they'll simply pick up the phone and talk to their creditors. So the way that I was able to rebuild at the speed we did was because I didn't go through the bankruptcy process. That would have stifled me for a good 7 years. Mm-hmm. So talk through and we tell this to all of our borrowers because we service a pretty large portfolio of private money loans nationwide now. And here's our 3 rules: keep them talking, keep them working, keep them paying. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not the full amount, right? Keep them talking, keep them working, keep them paying. Because we can work through, no matter how bad the situation is. Your creditors will work through it with you if you'll just continue to pick up the phone and talk to them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people in that 2008, 2009 scenario, they all just put their heads in the sand. They stopped answering the phone and they stopped communicating. And so I think that we could have avoided the crisis to the degree that it went into if people would have just answered the phone from the creditors and said, hey, I can't pay you the $3,000 I agreed to pay you, but I can pay you $800. Will you take $800 for the next 36 months? Yeah, let's do that. But unfortunately, that's not what people did. So the way that I was able to work through that, Sean, is number 1, negotiating with suppliers to avoid bankruptcy. And number 2, putting my energy back into my list. So fortunately, I'd learned the value of any business is in the customer base. Mm-hmm. And so I poured every ounce of energy I had into helping my customers through that period. And I created programs for loan modifications and how to negotiate short pays with your lender and how to help other people successfully navigate loan modifications with their lender. Mm-hmm. And I kind of became the preacher to the market about how to avoid foreclosure and bankruptcy and how to work through it. And my list responded. They purchased these programs, and that's really what got us through.
What about the psychology, I guess, behind it too? Was it your faith that at that time that pushed through, or was it, where did you get the mental strength, I think, or get over the, maybe, I don't know, depression? I think a lot of people face different things, but at that time.
I think faith helped a lot, certainly. But my wife was my biggest advocate, biggest cheerleader through that process. Mm-hmm. Because she had seen, what we had done. She had seen the scale that we had grown this thing to. And if you can do something once, you can certainly do it twice. Mm-hmm. And she was really the one, the cheerleader behind it, going, hey, Lee, you did it before. We can do it again. Put your boots on, put your big boy pants on, get back to work. And that's what we did.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, those are awesome tips that you shared with our listeners as well. So I want to take it back. So if you were just starting out and can go back in your early 20s, what advice would you give yourself, Lee?
I want to caution the audience with this response, because what I'm about to say is not a requirement to be successful in real estate. But if I could go back to my 18-year-old self in 1995, I would have told myself to get my real estate license immediately. Because what I realized, I got my license in 2001 to facilitate my foreclosure acquisition company, but I spent 6 years without it. Well, 8 out of every 10 deals closes with a realtor, right? So every time I would buy or sell a house, 8 out of every 10 deals, a realtor was getting paid, and it wasn't me. And my volume was scaling to the point where I was paying my realtors $80,000 to $150,000 to $200,000 a year just to write offers for me.
Yeah.
Well, I was also paying for my own office space and my own copy machine leases and all of my overhead. If I would have just got my real estate license and hung it with like a Keller Williams, I could have used all of their equipment and their space and everything at no cost other than the split when I actually made money.
Yeah.
But every seminar I went to said, don't get your real estate license. It'll kill your investment business. Do you know why they tell people that? Because when you do that, you have to disclose everything. And you don't want to have to disclose everything. And I think that's such terrible advice. So for me, the advice I would give is get your real estate license, hang it with a good brokerage that knows what they're doing, that accepts and is favorable to real estate investors, right? Don't teach me how to sell houses, teach me how to invest in houses and sell my own inventory. So I right now am one of the top realtors in the Pacific Northwest, and I don't have any buyers or sellers as clients. We simply represent our own acquisitions and our own purchases through MLS. And it's been a game changer for, the last 21 years.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Why did you say you caution it?
Because in a mixed crowd, and when I go out and speak to an audience of real estate investors, half of the room is, shaking their fist at me like that's the worst advice ever. Because you shouldn't get your real estate license. And the other half is sitting there thinking, you know what? I did flip like 20 deals last year and I paid my realtor $250,000. I could have hired 10 VAs for that $250,000 and they could have done, 10 times more work.
Yeah. I second that advice. I got my real estate license right out of college, so I second that.
I think I beat you. I just married one. Yeah, so that worked.
That works too, right?
So it's death. Yeah, until death do us apart. Because it's. But just I think with the times that we're going through, and I would just love your just a quick take on. We're obviously entering some challenging times. You mentioned your core businesses are real estate focused, real estate heavy. Obviously they raised the rates again yesterday. So what are you doing to prepare your companies, yourself, so you don't relive 2008? And I'm sure you've learned tremendous amounts. But give some advice on what people and listeners should do out there that as we go through some very challenging times, I think, over the next year or so, a couple of years.
Yeah, and it's not so much what we're doing now, it's what we've been doing since 2009 as a result of that. So 2009, I lose everything. And shortly after that, the Obama administration comes out with this new first-time homebuyer plan. They pump a bunch of money into FHA and VA, and they provide all these housing vouchers to first-time, second-time homebuyers as well as low income. Well, the types of properties that they were making that funding available for was predominantly single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, anything that would be designated residential real estate. And anything that fell below the FHA cap in that market, which is where 80% of your buyers qualify for funding, is where the money was being thrown. So I went in and said, okay, no more jumbo homes, no more luxury houses, no more, Lee wants to feel like a big player guy, multi-million-dollar mansions. I'm done with that. And we came to a very simple 5-point criteria that all of our acquisitions are tied to. Number one, it has to fit on the FHA cap. So our retail sales price will not be higher than the FHA cap. And you go to my website or you can just Google FHA cap in your county and it'll tell you what the cap is. So we don't flip anything where the cap exceeds that number. Number two, we don't do anything that's larger than 2,800 square feet. Because if we end up having to keep the property and rent it, you guys know better than I do. Turning a large home is expensive. 2,800 square feet is the max. So that's number three. Number four, I don't want anything that's bigger than 5 bedrooms and 3 baths because that is not the predominant market. It might be in Salt Lake City, Utah, but it is not around the rest of the country. Most households now are two spouses and 2 kids. So 1,200 square feet for us has become the sweet spot. 1,250 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths with no stairs. If I can get that product, I'll buy it all day long and I'll pay retail price because I can rent it immediately and keep it filled without any challenge. So that was number 4. And then number 5, I didn't want properties that exceeded a half of an acre of ground, simply because that put us in most markets into predominantly rural areas, which means now I don't have economies of scale, because if I've got to go manage or maintain that property, it's probably going to be outside the city limits. And whoever's going there is going to be spending 30 to 45 minutes in the car to facilitate one property. So we really streamlined our operation. We only purchased and built those types of assets. And as a lender nationwide, we only lend on those types of assets. Do you guys know what you call a private money lender in a recessionary downturn?
No.
Landlord.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, back in.
So as a lender, I'm training our customer base to buy the assets that, in a recessionary downturn, have the easiest turn to go from a flip to a rental. So that's what we've been doing from 2009 to present. So for the audience that's listening, at least from my perspective, to weather the financial storm of the next 12 and 18 months that is here, nobody wants to call it a recession. It is.
Yeah.
You got to stick in lower income properties, not in war zones. If you got to carry a shotgun to collect your rents, that's the wrong place, right? But good quality properties in nice neighborhoods that people want to live in, that fall under those 5-point criteria. As long as you stay in those 5 points, you're always going to have funding available. The government is always going to create low-income housing vouchers and programs for people that occupy that type of product, and you're never going to have stale inventory that you can't move. So if you can be very diligent and disciplined in staying there, you're going to do very well. And the lower the price, the better the economics, because the rental rates are not dropping at the pace that the value of homes is dropping, because people still need to live somewhere.
Right.
But with interest rates now, by the first of the year, interest rates are going to be well above 8.5. I mean, the same price I was paying in 95 and 6 when I started flipping, 8.5. Well, 8.5 is not a bad rate if you compare it to the early 80s when it was 16.
Right.
But for an 8.5 rate to be affordable, prices have to drop about 30% to accommodate that price. So where you're going to see the biggest, most significant drops in value are going to be on properties above the FHA cap, because there's absolutely no market for those properties. Because if I'm wealthy, right, you know what, if the market stinks and I can't get good financing, I'll just stay in the house I'm in for another couple of years. It's, 6,000 square feet. It's got a pool. I'm very comfortable here. I don't have to move.
Right.
But to your lower income blue collar clients, the FHA cap, they may have to move for their job. They may have to move because there are no jobs where they are. That price point is going to continue to cycle even in a recessionary downturn. So if you stay there, you should be fine. But don't go big. Don't develop big. Stay in residential single family. Avoid commercial unless it's multifamily. Avoid industrial. Stay out of all of those specialty type products, because lenders are pulling back. They're getting much more particular about what they will or won't invest in. And if it's not tied to a residential rental income, getting funding for that project over the next 18 months is going to be very, very challenging.
Yeah, good advice.
Love it. It's
you
practical.
Talked about and what we went through back then as well. We just stayed to our core little Cracker Jack boxes.
Our little 20,000 profit per house, but we didn't have the we don't have no crazy downturns or scars, I guess you'd say, from 2008. Because we were similar to you. We got started in '99, and so we just always stuck to our little 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, 1,500 square foot homes, and it's always paid off.
It worked. So
thank you for that.
Practical advice there. Perfect. So I know, Lee, you're making an impact in this world, obviously. I want to know, what's your next?
My next is just more of the same. We're going to continue to be disciplined in our underwriting criteria in the properties that we're acquiring, the properties we're developing. But my goal over the next 60 months is to have 4,000 doors under management, either that we own or that we've built, or that we are managing for other people. Because I believe that as the markets continue to adjust and the millennials continue to choose to rent over buy, especially with rates at 8.5, I believe the larger the rental portfolio, the sounder the economics around that portfolio, the economies of scale exist. and we can do it better, faster, cheaper than anyone else, which produces great rates of return for our customers, but also allows us to buy properties at higher price points because we don't need the same, dollar per door or revenue per door because we can manage them less than our competitors. So scale is what's next for me. But again, not because scale is what drives me. It's simply because with 4,000 doors under management, the revenue of the company goes up another 400 or 500%, and that just feeds the market.
Yeah.
What I see in the future, Joni, is BB for J conferences, Be Bold for Jesus conventions happening around the country. I believe that what we are doing here is the beginning of a model that we will take nationwide. And we'll be doing one of these events in a city near you throughout the year. That's what's next.
Awesome. Great. Well, how can people get a hold of you, Lee?
I'm pretty easy to find. Just go to kogocapital.com. Kogo Capital, C-O-G-O, kogocapital.com. You'll find all of my contact information there. You'll find info about the FHA caps. If you want to research what those are in your particular county, just go to kogocapital.com. And if you'd like to get information from us on markets and trends, you can just fill out the little form there to be added to our list. And we'll continue to update you weekly with what we see happening in the market and what we can do to help you. And if you need funding on any of your deals, Kogo Capital would love to be your lender.
Sweet. And we're going to have all of that in the show notes as well, so it's easy access for everybody. But Lee, it's been awesome to have you on. I knew you were going to bring it today, and you did, added a ton of value to our listeners. So we are super grateful for you today.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I always love hanging out with you when we're at events and mastermind groups. So looking forward to seeing you at the next one.
I know, we miss you.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see everybody next week.
All right, see you guys.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Sean and Joni Wolfswinkle. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there talking. Talking. But Joni and Sean are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.